Hebrews, Hebrews, Hebrews. This is Prophets of Awakening. Friday night, will be indulging in a non-Messianic conversation. 21st of April, 2023. Okay. For those that don't know, you can go to our YouTube channel, to Prophets of Awakening. Check out our videos. It's a lot of information given in the videos to connect dots for you and lead you to the truth of the Holy Scriptures. And if you like what you are hearing and receiving from the channel, I'm asking you to like, share, and subscribe to Prophets of Awakening. It'd be greatly appreciated. Okay. So, that being said, um, this is a non-Messianic channel, and by that I mean that we only deal with the Tanakh, which is the Old Testament, so-called Book of Remembrance, and the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Shalom and welcome to Prophets of Awakening, and welcome to our non-Messianic conversation. Before we get started, we're going to do a moment of silence, Sabbath prayer. We're going to read the Psalms, and current events, a little need-to-know information, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A. Then we'll go into discussion, non-Messianic discussion. I'll be dealing with some videos pertaining to debunking the New Testament. Okay. This moment of silence is for the Lord of hosts and all that he's doing to bring about our prophesied deliverance in these latter days, to return us to our homeland. O Lord, righteousness and uprightness belongeth unto thee. Therefore we come before thee at this hour, seeking thy face and looking for righteousness and uprightness, that we may walk before thee as thy servant David, Solomon, Samuel, and Hezekiah did, that we may walk before thee in truth and in righteousness and in rightness of heart. Give unto us, O Lord, an understanding heart, that we may discern between good and bad, when you possess the power to do just that. For we desire to walk after thee, O Lord, and to keep your commandments and your testimony, the statutes, with all our heart and soul, to perform the words of the covenant that was written down by your prophets. O Lord, allow thy face to shine upon thy people, and hear our plea. Hear and do, O Lord, and hide not thy face from us, for we need you so very much at this hour. Peace be unto you. Okay. Got a reading of the Psalms.
Yes, sir. Shalom, everyone. I'm going to read Psalm 100.
Morning,
Serve with gladness. Make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all ye lands. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before his presence with the singing. Know ye that the Lord, he is God. It is he that hath made us, and not we ourselves. We are his people, and the sheep of his pasture. 4. Enter into his gates with thanksgiving, and into his courts with praise. Be thankful unto him, and bless his name. For the Lord is good. His mercy is everlasting, and his truth endured to all generations. That was Psalm
Okay.
100, served with gladness.
For what you get out of it.
I I get out of this psalm is a as a psalm of praise, and I see that there are three causes for praise. Uh, One will be the Lord is good, and His mercy is everlasting, and His truth endured forever. So Psalm 100 to me is just a psalm of praise. And other reasons I see in this psalm is that we need to be thankful that we are His chosen people.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. You got some current events.
We've seen or heard the news that Africans are trying to win themselves off of the overdependence on the US dollar. And some people are sensationalizing the headline and saying, oh, the dollar is finished. And some are saying, kill the dollar for the African economies to be able to come up and be able to be stable on their own and reduce the power that we've given America over some of these African economies. But what's the reality on the ground? Well, a country like Zimbabwe is still suffering from some of the, what do you call them, sanctions that were imposed on the country from many years ago, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years ago. And that has sort of destabilized the country and sort of destabilized the local currency. And it has little to no value. And that's because the people who hold the power dictate what happens in your country. And the South African president, or rather former South African president, Thabo Mbeki, is saying it is time to kill the dollar, reduce its dominance so that Africans can have a little bit of say and power over what happens in the economy.
The basis that you are using their currency in order to avoid the consequences of sanctions that arise from that, let's walk away from the dollar. And hence there's a global discussion taking place.
Hello there, how are you doing? Thank you for joining us in another one of our videos. My name is Indira Ganga. I am a business journalist by profession and also a digital content creator. I make videos on diaspora relocation to the continent. And you can find me on YouTube at Ondiro Oganga, or you can from being the best performing currency against the dollar in 2019 to being the worst performing currency against the dollar. The Zambian kwacha also took a hit. The Kenyan shilling is still taking a hit. A couple of years ago, 3, 4, 5 years ago, the dollar to the Kenyan shilling was 100, and now it's at about 134. And it just keeps gaining momentum every single day. Now, what does this mean for African economies, particularly many of them that heavily rely on borrowing, and they borrow on the dollar, they trade with the dollar? It just means that the cost of doing business becomes very expensive. Life becomes very expensive. Inflation goes up, and we all know how African economies are. There are certain economies like China and America and the UK that can, with ease, not easily, but with a little bit of ease, absorb some of these shocks on the economy. But some African economies, some of these shocks really trigger some detriment to the economy. And when I say the economy is such a large picture, but the people that suffer are the ordinary Ghanaians, the ordinary Zambians, Zimbabweans, Kenyans, South Africans. And so African leaders and leaders from developed and developing worlds are sitting down and saying, this has to come to an end. Our overdependence on the dollar is really hurting us. And why do we honestly have to depend on the dollar to trade amongst each other? If Brazil and China, sometimes I just cannot believe. To the US dollar be the central currency that they do business with, you know, and Russia has been at the forefront of leading this agenda because that's what it is. It's an agenda. Whoever it benefits, we will wait and see. And Africa has been in the midst of it, particularly South Africa, and we're just seeing that conversation is beginning to take place, and not just in South Africa. I mean, the president of Kenya, true or not, has been going on and on and on about how Kenyan companies have reached an agreement with the United Arab Emirates to import oil on Kenya shillings basis vis-a-vis the dollar. Tanzania is also doing the same with some of its traders and agreeing that they will pay in their local currency as opposed to the dollar to reduce pressure that the country will have on accessing dollars. And you know, it's very important to know that South Africa is one of the leading countries in Africa that's part of BRICS in championing this agenda. And the former president, Thabo Mbeki, had very interesting things to say. So he was speaking at a gathering with UNISA, and the question of dollar dominance on the continent came up. And let's just listen to what he had to say, then we'll come and sort of react.
It's a question that our colleague is raising, which is about the use of the dollar as an international reserve currency. it's clear this is part of what is happening. Many countries are saying, in order to avoid this consequence of the imposition of sanctions by the United States on the basis that you are using their currency, in order to avoid the consequences of sanctions that arise from that, let's walk away from the dollar. And hence there's a global discussion taking place about that, and some of it is bilateral. When Russia trades with China, there's no reason why they must trade US dollars to exchange, none. And so that even India is saying the same thing. So globally, there's a discussion that is taking place to say we must find alternative means of trading among ourselves and not subject ourselves to the situation where there's one currency in the world, which becomes a global reserve currency, because it gives the country that is the issuer of the money, as the United States, it gives it the power to impose its will on everybody because you are depending on them. I'm coming back to this matter, therefore, that again you have an instance here which says it is better that we have a diversified financial system rather than to be so tied up with one currency. Hence, what the conflict that is taking place in Ukraine has produced that particular consequence. Now, I don't know whether our government, we've got a colleague here who comes from government, whether they have been discussing this matter, as to whether South Africa stands with regard to all of this. And because we're a big trading country, we're a very big trading country, and a matter of this reassessment globally.
So this video is saying that the African countries must walk away from the dollar in order for them to survive everything that's going on. They must walk away from the dollar. Anybody have any comments on that? Okay, got another one here.
Nurturing them is really powerful. We'll also nurture, I think, a broader peace with Saudi Arabia and nearly all of the rest of the Arab world. I intend to bring the Arab-Israeli conflict to a close.
It seems Israel and Saudi Arabia are slowly coming together and pushing out the U.S., a move that has been awaited for a long time by many. This could mean big things for Saudi and the rest of the Middle East. But before we get into that news, first we will analyze the results of Saudi oil cuts against the U.S. Many investors thought that the recent oil cuts by Saudi would be detrimental to their economy, but it seems Saudi Arabia's budget will more than make up for a production cut announced by the kingdom with OPEC and its allies, according to the International Monetary Fund, as it reels in more revenue thanks to higher crude prices and keeps spending in check. The impact on the budget and on the external position relative to what we had projected is positive, Amin Mati, the IMF mission chief to Saudi Arabia, said in an interview in Washington. So the price impact would offset the loss that could arise from the production. Oil has rebounded after a banking crisis that rippled across markets drove futures to a 15-month low in mid-March. Global benchmark Brent has held above $85 per barrel in April, following the unexpected decision to cut more than 1 million barrels in daily output starting next month. Saudi Arabia, OPEC's de facto leader and the world's top oil exporter, agreed to slash production by 500,000 barrels a day. Saudi oil revenues last year reached nearly $326 billion, a near-record windfall that combined with higher production volumes to make its economy the fastest growing in the group of 20. It also helped the government run a fiscal surplus for the first time in nearly a decade. The IMF anticipates Saudi economic growth will slow to 3.1% this year and next, from almost 9% in 2022, after sharply improving the outlook for 2023 in one of the fund's biggest positive revisions in its latest global forecasts. While Saudi Arabia's economic growth rate may suffer from lower crude production, the cuts won't affect its non-oil expansion because that's going to be driven by domestic demand, the IMF's Mahdi said. At least in the short term, we don't see a disruption in the spending pattern at the central government budget, he said. And on the economy as a whole, we see some of the investment in the private sector driving the growth. The IMF's optimism is at odds with the views of the likes of Goldman Sachs Group, which has argued that the Saudi fiscal outlook is weakening and now forecasts a deficit of 1.2% of gross domestic product this year, down from a shortfall of 0.2% seen previously. Goldman has said that it sees, at best, a modest benefit to the budget of Saudi Arabia after an implied reduction in fiscal revenues of about 5% this year, with Brent forecast to be just 7% higher by end 2023. Without the announced cut, Goldman estimated Saudi Arabia needed oil to average $76 to balance its budget in the current fiscal year. The IMF has taken a more upbeat view and previously put the Saudi fiscal break-even oil price at $66.80, down from $84.60 in 2021. Given that central government spending is now more contained and is expected to be reduced going forward, the oil price Saudi Arabia requires to balance its books is lower than what it used to be, Mahdi said. We expect that break-even price to become even lower. Saudi Arabia still depends heavily on the flow of petrodollars into the government's coffers to power expenditure on job creation and costly infrastructure. It's also shifted more capital outlays on economic development to the Sovereign Wealth Fund, known as the PIF, as well as another state investment vehicle, and those figures don't show up in the budget. To meet all spending commitments that include such giga projects as the $500 billion construction of the futuristic city of Neom, and to maintain the stability of the social contract between the government and the citizens, Saudi Arabia needs an oil price above $80 and perhaps closer to $100, according to Bloomberg Economics. Consolidated View authorities are working to provide more transparency on the sovereign balance sheet as a whole, an effort that's now become part of their priorities after being long encouraged by the IMF, Mahdi said. There's a lot of operations happening in the central government, like the PIF, the central bank, and other entities, he said. It's important to have a consolidated view of the fiscal position and what's happening. Saudi Arabia has tried to break the link with crude by holding back spending increases and using energy proceeds to accelerate projects that contribute to weaning the economy off a reliance on oil. Current plans call for keeping the budget in the black in the coming years after a slew of measures that included reductions in subsidies alongside more taxes and levies. The government's latest fiscal outlook, unveiled in December, showed it expected to run a surplus of 16 billion rials, $4.3 billion in 2023, nearly double its previous estimate. There's now a delinking that we are seeing in terms of oil price and spending patterns, Mahdi said. Today, there's a lot of fiscal discipline with higher oil prices. The IMF is also confident that Saudi Arabia won't prove too vulnerable should oil prices decline again, since it's in a better position to rely on non-oil revenue or compensate for any possible damage to the budget by reviewing some spending commitments, he said. The spending pattern today is sustainable and can also be financed, Mahdi said. You also have quite a lot of room on non-oil revenue that the government can undertake. They're also thinking about reforms on the revenue strategy, so that could help offset some of the decrease in oil price. Israel steps up talks with Saudi Arabia over ties to combat Iran. Israel's new government has stepped up U.S.-backed talks with Saudi Arabia on developing closer military and intelligence ties in light of growing concerns about Iran, according to several people familiar with the discussions. Officials from the two countries held exploratory meetings ahead of the recent U.S. Gulf Cooperation Council working group gathering on defense and security in Riyadh, 6 people said, asking not to be identified as the talks are private. Further.
Okay. Any comments on that? My reason for playing this is that if you understand the history between Saudi Arabia and Israel, they've been at each other's neck. Now all of a sudden, they coming together. So that should explain to you something is in the works. Saudi Arabia and Israel, especially with Netanyahu there, is trying to come together. Yeah, that don't sound good. Okay. Put this right here. This is some need to know information.
Okay, and so to be sure.
Okay.
Carnage in the retail sector does not stop. Even established names that have been with us for centuries are now starting to fall apart all around us due to the toughest economic environment we've seen since the 1970s. Consumers will lose some of their favorite stores this year, according to data provided by several sources familiar with the matter, from Starbucks to Disney, from apparel retailers to department stores. Everyone in the industry seems to be on the edge. The mass shutdowns are already happening as retailers grapple with the impact of declining sales, inflation, and huge debt burdens at a time of increased financial volatility and higher potential for disaster. Today, we've decided fighting for their life in 2023. Only the strongest will keep standing. And you should check this video out to see if your favorite brand is on the bankruptcy watch list. But before moving on, we kindly ask you to support our work with a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Without further ado, here are 20 retailers collapsing right in front of our eyes. 1. Kohl's. The former department store has been in trouble for years. When it founded in 1946, Kohl's entered the market as a supermarket chain. But over the course of 2 decades, the industry changed, and the company started to be crushed by bigger names in the grocery sector, leading its executives to rebrand it as a department store. Unfortunately, department stores were and still are the biggest victims of the retail apocalypse, forcing Kohl's to exit the sector in 2022 and restructure its operations to retail fitness, athleisure, and denim clothing. However, data provided by insiders shows that for the past 7 months, Kohl's retail sales have dropped. The company's thin margins, coupled with a nationwide decline in discretionary spending, are financially eviscerating Kohl's, which is now on Moody's Analytics bankruptcy watch list for 2023. 2. David's Bridal. Known as the Walmart of weddings, the bridal retail chain just filed for bankruptcy and announced it has plans to lay off 82% of its staff, or around 9,200 workers. The company was in distress for several months before seeking Chapter 11 protection. That marked the second bankruptcy in 5 years. CEO James Markham revealed that in case the company does not find a buyer soon, all stores may be closed by the end of this year, an announcement that sparked anxiety among brides-to-be from all over the country to save the business. 9. Morphe Cosmetics. A cosmetics and beauty manufacturer founded in 2008 and most known for its partnerships with beauty YouTubers like James Charles, Jeffree Star, Jaclyn Hill, is closing its doors for good. The company is shutting down all of its stores in the United States. The announcement came after the company has been hit by several lawsuits over the last year, including one by the owners of Arden Fair Mall, where Morphe allegedly failed to pay rent in 2022. Moreover, Morphe's parent company, Former Brands, has now filed for bankruptcy. 10. Sears. The downfall of Sears has been playing out for many years. The retailer continuously closed stores since it filed for bankruptcy in 2018. But 2023 may be the year the once popular department store officially shuts its doors permanently. The company decided to sell off parts of itself to help generate income and diversify its revenue stream, but to little avail as the company wasn't able to make profits. Peter Verardi, retail expert and CEO of Market Gap Pro, said during an interview with Best Life. It's also important to note that the company hasn't made a full-year profit since 2011. Due to these reasons, 2023 might be the year Sears goes extinct. Origins, the LeBeau Fragrances, Bumble and Bumble, Aveda and more has seen sales decline by 32% in the last quarter of 2022. Now, Estee Lauder has permanently closing 15% of its retail stores as well as several department store counters to reduce its market exposure. Over 2,000 jobs will be slashed during that process, and the outlook for 2023 remains gloomy. On Wednesday, the company said it expects sales to decline between 12% in the first quarter of 2023 due to falling demand. Revenue could also dip by 15%, which pushed its shares down by 53 cents this week alone. 18. Furniture Factory Outlet. The home goods retailer, primarily based in the central United States, filed for Chapter 11 during the pandemic when it was acquired by American Freight. But things haven't gotten any better for the company. Slower discretionary spending and a rising debt load forced Furniture Factory Outlet to close over 40 stores and rebrand more than 30 locations in an attempt to boost sales and stay afloat. 19. Guess. In the past decade, retail gene specialists failed to find a path to long-term success in the U.S. In the last quarter, the company reported a net loss of $2.9 million due to supply chain problems, rising transportation costs, and depressed demand even amid the holidays. Right now, Guess is closing 100 locations all over the country, and recent controversies around copyright issues may further damage its sales outlook as famous artists like Banksy protest against the brand on social media and fuel public outrage. 20. H&M. One of the largest clothing retailers in the world is falling apart in plain sight. In January 2023, the company said it was still suffering from the losses caused by the pandemic. Right after that, H&M said that it would be permanently closing 320 locations this year, a higher number than it originally planned in November 2022. Over 1,500 roles will be impacted as profits tumble more than expected and costs start to bite, CNBC reports. Rick.
Okay, so we see right here, it's not looking good. Like everything is going down. Okay. With that being said, I'm gonna open it up for some questions, comments, or anything you want to talk about, information that you came across or heard. You want to expound on it, talk about it. Anybody got anything? Okay. Play this right here. I didn't get a chance to play it yesterday.
Manager, Entertainment 360 has dropped actor Jonathan Majors after he was accused of assaulting his girlfriend. This with no proof. Well, I don't know if they got proof. I mean, they're moving like they got proof. But it appeared that after Jonathan's attorneys released the text messages that seemingly would have exonerated him, something else happened. And he's being dropped left and right. So his entertainment management has dropped him. His PR company has dropped him. Valentino Fashion House has dropped him. And others are cutting ties with him left and right. What do they know that we don't know? I gave the brother the benefit of the doubt based on history. I mean, look, man, everybody knows a white woman's tears is more valuable in the eyes of law enforcement than a black man's innocence. That's right, I said it. Boy, there ain't nothing more sacred in this country, to the establishment at least, than a white woman's tears. She can be the most lying, conniving, low-down, dirty scoundrel of all time. She just done. Man, somebody going to jail. Attack on one black man is an attack on all black men. An attack on one black man is an attack on all black men. An attack on one black man is an attack on all black men. My brothers, we can't make it this easy. I'm not saying black women are not guilty of the same behavior. I'm not saying that. But what I do know is black women are least likely to want to see a black man destroyed the way in which these snow bunnies have been destroying successful black men. Yes, there's black women capable of the same behavior, but on average, in general, black women, most decent black women, don't want to see black men humbled this way. Now, they say that the snow bunny went to the hospital for some minor scars or blemishes. Now, Jonathan Majors is a pretty athletic brother, works out very strong. If he choked out a snow bunny, I'm pretty sure the evidence would be obvious. Pale people bruise easily. Pale people bruise easily. Pale people bruise easily. So if Jonathan Major smacked this woman up, gripped her up, choked her up, as alleged, she should have purple bruises, red bruises, hand marks, finger marks. Pale people bruise easily. So if they're saying that there's hardly any bruises, then no way in hell am I inclined to believe that this brother is guilty of these allegations. But in the Me Too era, in the Me Too era, where white supremacy wears one of its favorite disguises, which is feminism. In the Me Too era, where white supremacy wears one of its favorite disguises, which is feminism, they now try, convict, and sentence black men in the court of public opinion. Jonathan Majors has already been lynched in the court of public opinion. Why did the military cancel his ad campaign? Same thing happened with Michael Irvin. Now, Michael Irvin, yes, he's a white man's black man, obviously. Not an example of what we want to see our men be like in our community, the way in which he jumped up for Jerry Jones, and Jerry Jones didn't jump up for him. But for Michael Irvin to be removed from Super Bowl coverage.
It's a fact. The new economy creates 1,700 new millionaires every.
Michael Irvin to be removed from Super Bowl coverage. For Michael Irvin to be removed from Super Bowl coverage without any strong evidence to prove the allegations was absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. Black men are guilty until proven innocent. And see, what's bothering me, my brothers? This is King Kong Consciousness live from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. What bothers me the most about the Michael Irvin situation, what bothers me the most about the Jonathan Major situation, totally preventable. Totally preventable. Totally preventable. Snow bunny hunting is the most dangerous form of hunting you can do in the United States of America as a black man. It is more dangerous to hunt for a snow bunny than it is to hunt for a lion, a tiger, a bear. The most dangerous form of hunting for the black men in America is snow bunny hunting. Michael Irvin didn't do nothing but have a conversation. But why did you need a conversation with the bunny? Jonathan Majors, from what I understand, allegedly, he was driving in a cab. But why were you with the snow bunny in the first place? Y'all know these white women are only considering you because you have something to offer them. That is it. You are a fetish at best for the Caucasian female. You are a fetish at best for the Caucasian female. You are a fetish at best for the Caucasian female. See, the white woman who dates the black man is like the white teenager who listens to gangster rap and wears his pants sagging. It's just a stage in their development. It's just a stage in their development. It's just a season in their lifetime. That's all it is. It's a season in their lifetime. So you are literally being destroyed just so a white woman can say she dated a black man. The cost of you dating these women is destruction of your livelihood. What is it about the snow bunny that has you Negroes so up in arms? What is it about bunny hopping that is so attractive to black males? And I ain't got nothing against the Neanderthal female. I have absolutely nothing against the Neanderthal female. But there is nothing positive that comes to the black community as the result of the original man dating the artificial woman. Why would original man want to date artificial woman? Somebody help me out.
Okay. Any comments on that? Anybody familiar with that story?
Yes, I watched a little bit of that story.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I mean, it's nothing unusual, you know, just another story to me. I don't understand it either, but
What this is
they
all about.
seem to always get to a certain status, even a lot of black men that are not at a certain status, and they seem to choose the snow bunny because of whatever reasons, saying that, we're too loud, we're disrespectful, we're this, we're that, you know, um, and I think those are just all excuses.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else got any comments on that? Yeah, so like I was saying before, we even tell us in the scriptures, the Lord of hosts, when he brought the Israelites to the mountain, to the Mount Sinai, he told them, don't let your sons marry their daughters, and don't let your daughters marry their sons. So that should be enough for us right there, but we've been disconnected from our culture for one thing, so we all discombobulated. Okay. So, like I said, the topic in tonight is for the discussion is we having a non-Messianic conversation, and the first thing I want to deal with is, if you ain't figured it out by now, JC being our savior is our biggest hang-up as a nation, and that's got to be dealt with before we leave here. Okay, so I'm gonna play this and then we'll talk about it. This is why and how did the Romans create Jesus? What was the whole purpose of them creating him? I'm gonna play a little bit of that, then we'll talk about it.
I don't hang out with them. I just don't. I have a job to do, and I'm going to do my job as I'm doing here every week. Okay. Well, today's message, brothers and sisters, is one of those messages again that caused such a stir and uproar. All right. So today I'm going to explain to you why and how the Roman Catholic Church created Jesus Christ. And people have said to me, you say that Jesus came into existence in 325 AD. Christianity existed before 325 AD. Christianity existed before 325 AD, but not Jesus Christ. Understand this. The Christianity that predated 325 AD is called the Christianity where they worshiped the god Serapis, Serapis Christos. I'm going to break all that down for you today in today's message, and you'll see why people say Christianity is older than 325 AD. But in 325 AD, that's when the Roman Catholic Church, under the order of Constantine, Emperor Constantine, literally issued an order to change Serapis Christos to Jesus Christos. You're going to see all that today. And again, family, don't take my word for the things I say. Do your own research, please. Please try to invalidate what I say, okay? I wish you would, okay? Please try to do that. Google it. As I'm saying it, you know, we have the technology now. You can validate everything I'm saying as you're listening to me. All right? So let's get ready to learn some more. And for those who've asked the question, okay, hey, Minister Pamela Howard, I see you there. Good to see you, girl. Yep, and she wrote in the chat room, take notes, y'all. Take notes today, okay? I've had people say to me, man, why don't you just leave us alone? Just leave us alone. Let us be. It kind of reminds me of the story in the biblical text where the teacher of righteousness came and people who were demon possessed said, leave us alone. Don't bother us. Don't bother us. Well, I have to address the lie. I have to. That's the only way I'm going to set you free. Okay? And show you how the lie came into existence. Right? So let's learn that now. And whatever time we have left after, I'll share some more information with you on that. But let's get right now into the message for today. Okay? Learn. As always, I'd like to take a moment before getting into this message to just say up front, I don't intend to hurt anyone today, all right? And I say that because I find out, brothers and sisters, that sometimes things are said that are virtually unbearable for some people. Like I said on the radio this morning, y'all remember that scene in A Few Good Men? For those who saw that movie, where Jack Nicholson was sitting on the stand in the courtroom, and the man said, "I want the truth," and Jack Nicholson said, "You can't handle the truth." I found out a lot of our people can't handle the truth. They really can't. But I still got to give it. I still got to give it, you know. It's almost like surgery, you know. So if I say something that is a little bit outside of your realm of awareness, please exercise intellectual vigilance. And instead of shutting me down and instead of shutting your own mind down, make note of what I said that you don't understand and go do your research. Okay? Go do your homework on it. Go verify what I said. If I'm saying something that you don't know anything about, how can you say anything about it? Right? Okay, so having said that, let's get into the message for today. As you see, the subject of today's message is Nicaea, 325 AD. AD stands for Anno Domini. It does not stand for after the death of. Okay? Anno Domini is Latin, which means in the year of our Lord. What's really deep, brothers and sisters, is this really ought to tell you something. How the Gregorian calendar has been completely adjusted around the existence of someone that the Roman Catholic Church made up.
So let's look at that right quick. I didn't want to stop it, but I need to expound on that. So I'm in Daniel right quick. So they created the calendar that we're dealing with, dates and all that. The calendar we're looking at around JC, right? I don't know if anybody knows that. So let's look at it. It says, and this is one of the reasons I keep going to this verse right here all the time. It says, Okay, let me get it. Yeah, I mean, Daniel 7, starting at verse, pertaining to the fourth beast, which is Constantine was in the fourth beast. Says 23, 7, Daniel 7 and 23. Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all the kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. Then right here, 24. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall arise after them. And he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. So go to the Roman Empire during the time of Constantine, it got divided up. The beast that received the womb in the head. It's not a man, it's 4 beasts. And then the 4th beast received the womb in the head. They sacked Rome. Rome got sacked, and then the Roman Empire got divided into 4 parts, just like the Greek kingdom. They had 4 different kings in 4 different areas. Constantine came and destroyed the other 3. That's what it just tell you right here. Subdued 3 kings. He subdued 3, then he brought the Roman Empire back. But now he got JC as a god, and Christianity as a god. That's how the beast received the womb and still lived. But anyway, 25, tell you, this is Constantine. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, that's Israelites, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hands until the time of times and dividing the times. So we still dealing with that right now. For the people that don't know that, we still dealing with everything Constantine did as Council Nicaea. And we see right here, he changed times and laws, like the brother just said. And the laws is our laws. They got changed all around, flipped around. And our prophecies. Okay?
That's some deep stuff. I mean, they actually started counting time down up to a certain point, you know, BC, or BCE before the Common Era. Then it comes to a certain point in history, and then they start counting up again. Okay? So here we have, this is 2006, right? According to who? You mean tell me we've only been here 2006 years? No. Actually, I think this is 6,746. According to, if I'm correct on that, according to, and that's called after the founding of Kemet, AFK. So according to the ancient African calendar, or the first stellar calendar, this year would be 6,746. Y'all follow what I'm saying? Okay. Now we got a problem with that. Okay, because that's after the founding of Kemet. That's just the calendar found in Egypt. You follow what I'm saying? And those of you who are going with us to Kemet this year, you'll get at the Temple of Dendera, you'll get to see the first stellar in the observatory there. You'll get to see the first zodiac that was used. Okay, which they copied all that from. Now some deep stuff, because if we're talking 6736 or 6736 after the founding of Kemet, and yet Kemet is the child of Ethiopia. Y'all follow what I'm saying? Okay, and the civilization that came into Kemet with full knowledges of the math of math and sciences and horticulture out of agriculture. Y'all follow me? So how far back does African consciousness really go?
Okay, so my thing was to show you that what's going on with Daniel. This video is why and how the Roman Catholic Church created Jesus. So you want to check that out. You know, write that down. All you do is type it in the search block, check it out. Okay, and another thing I had talked about. Anybody have any comments on that? like I said, write that down, and it's why and how the Roman Catholic Church created Jesus Christ. So I've been talking to you. I done mentioned this over and over again about they having issues with trying to find him in history, and they can't actually locate it or find him in history. So I'm gonna play this right here, and we'll go into it. The reason why. And it seems like to me it's evading everybody, but the handwriting is on the wall. Okay, here we go.
Time when it comes to this hypothesis, it really started many years ago. And I'm not going to go into the beginning because it sort of evolved. Let me instead say that even if it wasn't the impetus, that the reasoning behind the hypothesis is really the thing that everybody is basing their hypothesis or non-hypothesis about Jesus on, namely that you cannot find him outside of the New Testament in real time. During the first century, if you accept Testimonium Flavianum, which is a paragraph in Jewish Antiquities by Josephus, which almost everybody says is to some extent a falsification, or people vary as to how much different it is from what is the original, but at least it wasn't originally there as it's written. Outside of that, you really don't find Jesus in the first century historical texts outside of the gospel texts, the New Testament texts. And so there are two main hypotheses. One is, okay, he was sort of one of the many messianic claimants, and that was a tumultuous century, and he's just buried in there with the rest, which is sort of the majority view among scholars. And then there's a minority view, which basically says, no, he never existed at all. It's all fiction.
Now, on that note, I just like to plug so we have good dialogue. This is going to be an introductory show because I honestly think you could do a series on this show, because I was blown away on your paperwork. Focusing on that, I would like to ask you to please name some of your books for our audience. Some people are not familiar with some of your works that you have written on these things. I'll have them down in the description so that they can click the Amazon link and get a hold of them. What are some of your books you've written?
Well, I'm basically, my background is not as a biblical scholar at all. I'm an MD, PhD by training. But many years ago, I shifted to doing documentary filming, and I'm presently mostly working as an author. I have two books that are published on the historical Jesus, and they both deal with the time shift. Both of them, the first one was written originally in Swedish. It came out in 2006. It was in Swedish, the translated title was What Happened on the Road to Damascus. In English, it became The Jesus Mystery, with a lengthy subtitle that I don't remember, but it was called The Jesus Mystery. Now, after that was published, and in English it came out in 2007, for a number of years, I went to the Society of Biblical Literature conferences, and they accepted my abstracts, and I was allowed to present. So I did maybe 5 or 6 presentations over a few years at the Society of Biblical Literature international annual meetings of this hypothesis. And there was something happened. It was really interesting what happened. When I was in the seminar room and I presented it as a PowerPoint presentation, it was completely quiet. Everybody followed me. Everybody knew what I was doing. The questions that came afterwards were incredibly relevant. Everybody was with me. always somebody would come up to me and said, why hasn't this been published in a journal? I'll help you do it, or you should contact this person or whatever. And then when the seminar was over and the door closed, it was as if it never happened. And this repeated itself over and over again. And when I contacted, there were quite a few people, and these were a number of seminars. If I contacted them afterwards, it was like it never happened. It was very fascinating. And it wasn't disturbing as much as it was interesting, and it was a confirmation of how people's minds work when we encounter things that make sense but don't fit with our preconceived notions or our ideas of what truth is. It's just very interesting, and it's certainly true in science as well, and perhaps more than anything in biblical science.
Everyone needs to have this tool to protect their home and
to faith. In any event, so I kept having these presentations, and in the end, I decided, no, I'll publish a second book where I assemble more of the data I had, because the first book, the Jesus Mystery, as it's called in English, is more of a literary piece, and I decided, okay, I'll make it written in a popular way, but I'll put in all the evidence that I'm presenting in this scholarly context. And that became A Shift in Time, and that was published in 2016.
You actually sent me the article on this, right? This is
right. That's the article that came out of the presentations at the Society of Biblical Literature.
I want to talk about that. I mean, let's go into some meat, if you don't mind, because
sure.
First of all, for our audience who hasn't read this, you really should get the book. I was astounded. I love it because that's what we entertain on this show. We're big on finding out, like, who is Jesus? Was he a rebel leader? Was he just a faith healer? Trying to figure out who the guy was, which you do a good job in this article and in the book. I'm certain this is the condensed version, so to speak. Jesus, first of all, he doesn't fit in the 30s. He doesn't fit in this window. And you do a good job by going to these other people. Like the book of Acts talks about the Egyptian. The book of Acts talks about Judah, the Galilean, okay, or Judas, however you want to pronounce his name. These actual people who existed in history in Josephus, you find these guys and you're like following their cookie crumbs. You're saying, okay, here they are, and you're using details of the robbers. You mention a term, robbers, that is utilized in the New Testament and in Josephus. And you do this fascinating thing where you go, where's it at? And there's charts. These charts are showing before the 30s, like in the beginning, very first century beginnings, you have all these activities and these terms being used in Josephus, talking about historical stuff. Then you have after that in the 50s and 60s. And it's like, where's it going on under the Pontius Pilate situation? Exactly. What does that do to the extra biblical historical context of stuff from Tacitus and Suetonius? How does that affect the Crestus who's being killed in the 30s supposedly, if Josephus isn't even really going, hey guys, look, it's right here? I don't understand.
What you're talking about is evidence from the 2nd century. It's, you're not talking about, Josephus is the only person who is writing at the same time as the gospel authors, mainly. He is really, and not only is he writing at the same time, but he is any other source looking at this period and looking at this geographical place is minuscule compared to Josephus. He really covered it. And what is so fascinating and that's why everybody is comparing the New Testament with Josephus, because that's the source, and all they find is Testimonium Flavianum, which is sort of wasn't there from the beginning. We don't have to go into all the evidence there. There's plenty of evidence.
Right.
In any event, so the thing, when I started writing the first book, I was doing it because of another hypothesis I was exploring. And I decided that I was just going to do this comparison. I was just going to start from the beginning. I was just going to do what everybody else was doing. And then this weird stuff kept popping up. You know, it's like, it wasn't only that Jesus wasn't there, or his disciples, or Christianity wasn't there in Josephus, but the people, the famous people from the New Testament, you know, all the dignitaries and the high priests and the emperors and the procurators and prefects, you know, the names were there in Josephus, but hey, they weren't doing the stuff that is described in the New Testament. It was like nothing fit. It wasn't only that Jesus wasn't there, but it was like these, you know, like there were no two high priests, Caiaphas and Annas. They weren't the high priests together. I mean, they were separated by 3 high priests. They never ruled together. I mean, there were lots of these things. I mean, that Pilate was killing Galileans. I mean, Pilate wasn't even ruling Galilee. I mean, there were all these loads and loads of things that weren't fitting with the dignitaries. But the funny thing was that there were things that fitted with the dignitaries, but 20 years later. And you know, it was like this thing when for me, the interesting thing is that when I started writing the book, I came 2/3 through the book until we say in Swedish that the coin drops. Well, I guess maybe it suddenly was a late night. Basically, what happened was there were all these chronological things that were not correct in the 30s. They weren't there. I mean, robbers. There were no robbers in the 30s. There isn't a single robber mentioned by Josephus between the year 6 and the year 44. None. But they are very much present before, and they're very much present after. No crucifixions between 4 and 46. No crucifixion, but before, yes, and afterwards, yes. And there were loads of things that, you know, just wasn't there when it was supposed to be there. And then there was this guy, the Egyptian.
The Egyptian.
It sounded an awful lot like Jesus. He spent time in the wilderness, just like Jesus. It was called the Egyptian. There was an Egyptian connection to Jesus. He gathered his disciples where? On the Mount of Olives, which is where Jesus gathered his disciples. He preached to his disciples that he was going to tear down the walls of Jerusalem. Very similar to what Jesus was preaching. He was perceived, and the interesting thing is that if you look at the 30s, there isn't a single messianic claimant or a single leader, religious leader mentioned at that period. But the Egyptian is one of those that is mentioned as one of the major leaders. He's in both Jewish antiquities and War of the Jews, Jewish War. So he's a big one, but he was in the 50s. He was not in the 30s. And then there were a few things that didn't fit. There were many things that did fit, but there were a couple of things that didn't fit. First of all, the Egyptian was not crucified. What is said is that just like Jesus, he was defeated, or whatever you want to call it, on the Mount of Olives, exactly the same spot. And he was perceived as a threat by the authorities.
Meet the Thunder One ST by Velotric, the e-bike with a
difference is that.
Yeah, we going somewhere with this. Anybody got any comments so far? Anybody puzzled? Okay.
Whereas Jesus was resting and with his disciples, and then he was arrested, resting and arrested by the Sanhedrin, the Jewish council, the people sent out by the Jewish council. This is not what happened with the Egyptian. What happened with the Egyptian was that the procurator, who wasn't Pilate at that time, it was Felix, he sent out Roman soldiers, a cohort of Roman soldiers, to fight against the Egyptian and all his disciples up on the Mount of Olives. And it was a big battle, and a lot of people were killed. This is what Josephus described. And then he says, but the Egyptian escaped out of the fight and he was not heard from again. Now, I kept putting in, in those first chapters of the book, because I was making this, I was writing as I was being perplexed. So I kept putting in this, the Egyptian. It's awfully weird how similar he is to Jesus, but hey, it's in the 50s. It's not, and then late one night, it's really late at night, I am sitting with the Greek, I don't know Greek, but I sit with the sort of parallel Greek translation of John, of the description of the Gospel of John, of how Jesus is arrested. And there's a difference between John and the Synoptic Gospels in the description of the arrest. Because in the Synoptic Gospels, you know, the Sanhedrin, the Jewish council, the men come up and they arrest Jesus. In John, it says that the men from the Jewish council is accompanied by the Spera and the Chiliarchos. Now, in the translations, all the Swedish translations, English translations, it's like the captain and the guard. But that's not what it means. The Spera is a Roman cohort of 1,000 soldiers. And the Chiliarchos means a leader of 1,000. The Roman soldiers that, according to John, not according to Josephus, was sent up to arrest Jesus were 1,000 men. Okay? That is a battle. That's not arresting a resting man. That is a battle. And the interesting thing about the New Testament is that it's written there too. But it's as subtext. It's written in subtext. And there are hints. Once you sort of make the connection, you see it. You see in Luke that Jesus tells his disciples to bring swords up to the Mount of Olives. And you see that someone is cutting the ear of, you have the signals there, but you sort of gloss over them until you get the full picture. And it's like an autostereogram. I don't know if you call it that in English. Like when you read the text of the New Testament, all you see is the surface. And then you see all these weird little things, like the names of these rebel leaders thrown into the text, and you don't understand why, and you just gloss over it. One of them is the Egyptian is in the New Testament. It's in Acts. And you see Judas the Galilean, and you see Theudas, and they're all thrown into it. You see that the birth of Jesus is during the tax census under Quirinius. And you know what was born under the tax census under Quirinius? The Jewish rebel movement. That's when it was born. So what you see is you see the New Testament is written in layers, okay? And I'm now writing a book. I'm almost finished. I'm almost done with it. It's coming out this fall. It's in Swedish so far, and it's about the Old Testament. The interesting thing that I find is that, and I want to say this because it's important, I think, and it has to do also with the whole idea of mythicism, etc. Now, when you don't find something, you either say, well, it's so long ago, we don't have the evidence, or you say it's all invented, it's all fiction. But what I really believe now, after having worked on both the New and the Old Testament, is that the people who wrote these texts, they had to satisfy two needs. One was a religious need, to congregate people around, a vision of God and prophets, whatever. they had to have a story that fitted the movement and the religion, but they had another need too, and that was to tell history. They wanted to tell history. And so they had to, in order to, and these two needs, they didn't gel often because history wasn't always fitting into the needs of the religion. Sometimes it didn't fit at all. And so then what they would do is they would tell the story on the surface, and then they would, under the surface, they would tell the other story. And the only reason you could see the other story, that I felt that I could see the other story in the New Testament, was because I put Josephus on top of it and I shifted, but I had to shift it. And when I looked through the prism of Josephus at the New Testament, the whole story, you know, it sort of came up from below, if you understand what I'm saying. And suddenly, you know, when John then says that there's 1,000 soldiers and the commander coming up to the Mount of Olives, it's not crap. It means something.
Well, you know, something interesting looking at that passage, just because I can remember, I don't have the passage right in front of me, but, you know, it's like he turns and I think he says something or something, I can't remember, and they all fall like they're dead, which is just a funny fictional, there's something there as to why they're saying that these Romans they just fall like they're dead at the feet of Jesus. But then they get back up and then they arrest him, and he almost seems like he's in total control of the situation, how they fictionalize it here in John. I think it's beautiful what you're doing. I don't think your motives are at all bad. I think your motives are driven in the right direction of really trying to figure it out. I mean, who hasn't watched mystery videos and movies and thought, what if I could find the Ark of the Covenant? You know, and this is a different type of Ark of the Covenant, if you will, figuring out the enigma of the New Testament.
Okay, so let's look at that. Over and over again, I've been telling people on Prophets of Awakening how Cleopatra and Julius Caesar, they had a son, Caesarion. And so one of the golden cards in Christianity is that at 12 years old, after so-called Jesus had taught in the temple, he disappeared for 18 years. Then all of a sudden he popped back up at 30. He did from 30 to 33, he did his ministry, 30. So when you go to the story of Caesarion, which they took it out of the history books because that's who that is. That's who Jesus is. That's who the Egyptian is. So anyway, Cleopatra knew that Augustus Caesar was coming with those 3 legions. So she sent them away to a monastery up in, when Alexander came on the scene, conquering the world, his objective was from listening to, I can't think his name, a philosopher that had taught him, he came to create Alexandria's homosexual cities. That was because the Greeks are homosexuals. He was going around to all these different countries that he conquered. He would build a city, Alexandria. So it was more than just one Alexandria. The one that was in Egypt had other Alexandrias, and one of them was in the Himalaya Mountains, where his conquest stopped at. He had an Alexandria up there. Cleopatra would know that because she's a Edomian. Ptolemy was Edomite. So she sent him up there to this monastery to hide him out from Augustus Caesar, because he was a rightful heir. Augustus Caesar was adopted. Augustus Caesar was adopted son for Julius Caesar had adopted him, but the rightful heir was Caesarion. So he had, in order for him to become the Caesar and the ruler of the Roman Empire, he had to get rid of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. Mark Antony was Julius Caesar's #1 general. He was the next one in line. He had all legions held sway with him. He controlled the legions. And so then you had Caesarion. So she sent him away, hid him, and he went to this monastery. And then Augustus came and he killed Cleopatra. We know the story, and he killed Mark Anthony. Mark Anthony committed suicide, but Caesarion was up in this monastery. Okay, and not on, and Cleopatra had 3 other kids. She had 3 kids for Mark Anthony, which was Caesarion had brothers. One of them was Thomas. Then you had the twins, the girl and the boy that was twins, Mary and Thomas. Yeah, Mary and Thomas was twins. Then he had James. That's his. That's the 3 kids for Mark Anthony. So when he came back at 30 years old, he been raised by monks. He not in that lifestyle of being a Roman, to be a general and all that like Julius Caesar was. He was raised by these monks in the ways of the monks. So he come back looking for his brothers and sisters. They in Judea. That's the Egyptian right there. And the part about it I didn't know that it was in Josephus about the Egyptian. And there's a couple other places, I'm gonna do research on it, but there's a couple other places they mention the Egyptian. But that's who the Egyptian is. You know what I'm saying? It can't be Moses. Moses came long before that. This Egyptian right here comes at the end of the Israel kingdom. Moses came before the Israel kingdom, so it can't be him. So anyway, this is who this Egyptian is. And so, like I said before, nobody wants to deal with the 18 missing years. That's where he was at. Cleopatra sent him away. Caesarion at 12 years old. She sent him away in the monastery up in Himalaya Mountain, and Alexandria up in Himalaya Mountain. Then at 30 years old, he came back. And he came back to, like this guy saying, came back to reclaim his father's kingdom. That's why he was causing so much ruckus, because he was Julius Caesar's. He had Julius Caesar's blood in him, and he was Julius Caesar's heir. So that's why I was playing that. Like I said, if you want to watch all of it, is Jesus the Egyptian with Lena Ehorn. So that's Lena. Then her last name is Einhorn. You want to check that out. But yeah, and this right here, this going on the radar because nobody don't know that. Just like I'm showing you that 143 BC when the Israelites left. It's right there in the Bible. Let's read it. It wasn't 70 AD. Those are Edomites in the land in 70 AD that got ran out by Titus and Vespasian. It wasn't Israel had long been gone. So let's look at it. And so, like I said, when you hear this kind of stuff, you do what you want to do with it. You can let it roll off like water on a duck back, whatever you want to do with it. But you can't say it wasn't delivered. So anyway, let's look at it. Daniel. Okay, and you see it right here. It's in plain sight. It's just that as long as you tie it over JC, you can't see none of this. So it says chapter 8, right? Daniel had a big vision of a ram and he goat. Then we're gonna pick it up. It says, so Gabriel came to explain to him what he had seen with the ram and the he goat. That's in layman terms, that's the second and the third beast. The ram is let me get to it. Okay, so the ram with 2 horns is the Medes and Persian, and the he goat is Greece. That's the second and third beast, because they in captivity in the first beast, the Babylonians. So we're gonna pick it up when Gabriel break it down. Verse 18, Daniel 8 and verse 18. Now as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep on my face toward the ground, but he touched me and set me upright. And he said, behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the end of indignation, for the time appointed the end shall be. And like I said, not the end of the world. World's still going on. The end of Israel as a nation. He threw with Israel as a nation. He's finna bring it to an end. So he says, 20, the ram which thou sawest having the two horns are the kings of the Medes and Persians. There it is, right there. 21, the rough goat is the king of Greece, third beast. And the great horn that between his eyes is the first king, is Alexander. 22, now that being broken, whereas four stood up for it, four kingdoms shall stand up out of that nation, but not in his own power. In the latter times of their kingdom, this Greek kingdom, not the Roman kingdom, we haven't got there yet. When the transgressors are come to a fool, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. This is the Antichrist right here. 24, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. He shall destroy wonderfully, he shall prosper, practice, and he shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. Who the holy people? Israelites. So right here, when Israel got destroyed, and the nation of Israel came to an end, and it's right there in the first Maccabees. That's why they don't have it in the book. They put it over there in the Apocrypha book, but they tell you the whole story. They ran the Israelites out in 143 BC. And not only that, Antiochus made a covenant with them for 7 years, a week of years. The same thing they trying to tell you the Antichrist gonna do. And it already happened, like the woman was saying. They done tricked off the time periods when they concocted the New Testament. So anyway, it says 24, I'll read it again. And his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. He shall destroy wonderfully. He shall prosper, practice, right? And destroy the mighty and the holy people. That's Israelites. 25, and through his policies also, he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart. And by peace, he shall destroy many. That's the same thing they're telling you the Antichrist is going to do. He's going to come with peace, but all this didn't happen. It's Antiochus Epiphanes. So he says, and through his policies also, he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart. And by peace he shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hands. And that's in 2 Maccabees. This prince of princes is the Lord of hosts, Michael. He destroyed him in front of his whole army. He stricken him with a incurable disease right in front of the army. And he just fell off his chariot. Went into convulsions and started stinking, and then died in front of the whole army. That's what it's telling you in Daniel 8:25. But like I said, I'm just lining it up, So they had to do what they did with the New Testament in order to offset all this. Because, like I said before, we already got a Redeemer right here. Let me read it. We've been had a Redeemer long before the New Testament. Isaiah chapter 43, 44. Read it right quick, and then I got one more video to play. 44, verse 6. Isaiah 44 and 6. Thus says the Lord, the King of Israel, and his Redeemer, the Lord of hosts. I am the first, I am the last, and besides me there's no God. So he's telling you right here, he had a Redeemer. He the King, Yahweh the King, and my Redeemer, the Lord of hosts. And is a conjunction. So they already had a Redeemer. This Redeemer right here, the Lord of hosts, is who went to Egypt with the 10 plagues. Got the Israelites and delivered the Israelites out of Egypt. Okay? So let's look at that. 43 right quick. We're in 43 and 10. Isaiah 43 and 10, starting at verse 10. This is the Redeemer talking to the Israelites. Ye are my witnesses, says the Lord, and my servant whom I have chosen, that ye may know and believe me and understand I am he. Before me, there was no God formed. See that? Yahweh wasn't formed. So who is this? Enoch tells you in the beginning, he created 7 angels. The first angel he created was Michael. He's the first one formed. He formed 7 angels. That's who was in Genesis 1:26. So he says, verse 10, ye are my witnesses, says the Lord, and my servant whom I have chosen, that ye may know and believe me, and understand that I am he. Before me there was no God formed, neither shall there be after me. Neither shall there be after me, right? In 11, even I am the Lord, and besides me, there's no Savior. So we ain't fumbling with it no more. We telling you right here, Savior. That's what Redeemer means. I have declared, and I have saved, and I have showed when there was no strange God, small g, amongst you. Therefore, ye are my witnesses, says the Lord, that I am God. 13, yea, before the day was, I am he. There is none that can deliver. All these are synonyms of Savior. There is none that can deliver out of my hands. I work, and who shall let? This ain't Yahweh. So we go one more place. To put the nail in the coffin. Exodus 23 and 20. He's gonna show up again right here. 23 and 20. Okay. Says they on Mount Sinai, right? And the Lord host, Yahweh told Moses, picking it up in verse 20. Behold, he's talking to Moses, Lord, Yahweh. Behold, I sent an angel before thee to keep thee in the way and to bring thee into the place which I have prepared. Beware of him, obey his voice. So they ain't listening to Yahweh. He says, obey this angel voice. Provoke him not, for he would not pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him. He's who overseeing right here. He's over Israel's transgression. But if thou shalt indeed obey his voice and do all that I speak, then will I be an enemy unto thy enemies and an adversary unto thy adversaries. 23, for mine angel shall go before thee and bring thee into the Amorites and the Hittites, Perizzites, the Canaanites, these 7 nations. And so, like I said, I ain't write it. Most High just led me to the truth. That's all it is. It's been here, but you can't see none of it as long as you're dealing with JC, that idol. Okay? Any comments? Everybody good? Everybody good? Anybody got any comments? Okay. Play this right here. Close out.
I have one question for you, my personal question, and I could probably already get to your answer, but I'm not I want you to say your answer because I think that you and me would agree here. When you've poked holes in Paul, I've had other experts come on and say, well, Paul's doing similar stuff to what we find other Jews doing with the Hebrew Bible, the way that they might kind of use the Hebrew Bible to explain things. However, would you agree that while Jews may have applied text in new context with new meaning in certain eras, none of them have come to a conclusion of a Christ figure whose blood as a human poured out, etc. Is that where you would draw that line and say, while Paul might be what you call molesting the scripture, the reason it's such a, to use the term sin, if I can use that term, such a wrongdoing is that he's not just using it in the same manner that rabbis may have used it throughout history. He's applying it to an entirely different thing, what we call Christ.
This is a very good question. I want to illustrate this. I first want to share this one point that I've never said publicly. There are thousands of videos of me on here. So, I'm not asking you what song it is, but if I ask you, Derek, like, do you have a favorite song or a favorite group? If I ask you, what are your top favorite songs in the world? Like when you hear it, you put your headphones on, you just, right? So whatever you want, right? Mm-hmm. So probably some crazy Metallica song. I'm kidding. So the point is that if there's a song that you just heard so many times and then someone does a cover of it and someone else plays it, even if they change one note or even elongate a note, just a little more vibrato or a little less, you notice it immediately because you're so intimately familiar with this piece of music that any variant of it, you immediately, okay, to the religious Jew, okay, to the person who's immersed in the Hebrew Bible, it is so, we breathe it. It is so part of us. It's part of our breathing, our bloodstream. It's part of our DNA. That when anyone toys with it or plays with it, we feel it. We know it. We know exactly what's happening, and that's why the religious Jew always has that sensitivity that others will not. And it should be said that what I'm saying is not some idea that's way out there. If you go to any mainstream university, doesn't make it. Go to any university and take a course in New Testament, whatever, history of Christianity, any course like that. On the first day, the professor is going to say the following: that you cannot understand the New Testament, you cannot understand Jesus, unless you understand the Jewish world from which he emerged. That's day one, first one. That's how it starts, okay? So what I'm saying is probably not controversial. So when you come from the religious Jewish world, and remember, it's not like we're studying modern Judaism. Our primary sources in rabbinical school, in yeshiva, throughout our lives are the ancient texts, the Tanakh, the Mishnah, written 2,000 years ago. That's what we're studying. Those are our primary sources. That's the stuff that fills the marrow of our bones. So therefore, we could sniff this out. And what I'm going to do is I'll just give you an example of this to understand what Paul is doing. This is not that Paul has using some sort of device that rabbis use, but he's really completely damaging the plain meaning of the text. So the plain meaning of the text is called the pshat. In fact, you know, Derek, about a translation of the Bible into Aramaic called the pshita. Everyone knows that. That's an Aramaic word. It just means, it means simple, it means the plain meaning. Now, any homily, any drash, any subtext can never undermine, can never upend the plain meaning. Can never. You can have a drash, a midrash, a kind of a homily, some deeper explanation, which I'm glad to do on air, but it can never undo the plain meaning of the text. But that's all Paul is doing. Paul is deliberately sabotaging the plain meaning of the text. And what I'll do is I'll just give you a very fast example. It's a very famous example. But in Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 4, we have a very short passage in Torah, 4 words, Lo yisachsom shar b'disha, Hebrew. You shall not muzzle an ox when it's threshing. The Torah is very concerned about caring for animals. You can't cause an animal to suffer. So when your ox is threshing, you can't put a muzzle over it because that's the stuff the ox loves. Okay? Right. Paul quotes this verse in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 10, very famously. And he literally says, do you think God cares about oxen? And then he continues to say, no, it really means giving money to the church, to missionaries. What? So what Paul literally is saying, that plain meaning of the text should be completely dismissed. He says, God does not care about oxen. He doesn't care about this something. He literally says, does God care about oxen? That is molesting the text. That's not a homily. Christians are entitled to their homily, do what all they want. I don't buy into their homily. When I'm on here or I'm writing books, whatever, I always deal with the plain meaning of the text. But what Paul did is he delivered chicanery. It's a game of dealing from the bottom of the deck. It's playing hide the ball. It's not. This is not honest hermeneutics. And that's what I want people to see just by the plain evidence. So that's exactly correct. That was a very important question.
Thank you, Rabbi. I appreciate that. I'm going to.
Okay. Anybody got any comments? Anybody got any comments? Any questions on anything before we close out? Okay, can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Nobody ain't saying nothing.
Yeah.
Okay. You got a question? Okay.
No, sir, not at this time.
Oh, you learning anything?
Every night.
Okay. Yeah. All right. That's good to hear, man. So yeah. So nobody have nothing? Okay. So yeah. So tomorrow is Shabbat class. We got the morning class at 10. Then we got to close the Shabbat out at 6 that evening. Close the Shabbat out. So I see everybody in the morning at 10 o'clock for our Shabbat class. Say shalom. I see everybody.
Shalom,
Shalom.
women, children, grandparents.
All right.